So having to leave China quickly. Oh, there's cameras everywhere. Oh, the immigration has some crazy laws which are usually not really enforced. Is it gonna be with shooting? Is there gonna be police everywhere? Is it like a very monitored city or... All right.
So as we're leaving China, I want to share with you my honest opinion on how it felt like being on the ground in Shanghai and some of the surrounding cities. And some people have fears coming to China. They don't know what to expect. So today I want to share with you my experience. But the reality is some websites, like for example YouTube, are blocked. If you would be there, you could not be watching this right now without a VPN. In my opinion, one of the most essential tools to have while traveling. And this is where today's video sponsor, PIA, Private Internet Access, comes in. You see, especially while traveling, let's say you're sitting in a cafe in the airport, you're accessing the internet, and the reality is your data is not safe. So a virtual private network, or VPN for short, hides your IP address and safeguards your connection through an encrypted tunnel. And with one subscription, you can use it on up to 10 different devices. A great tool to log in from anywhere in the world. So with over 84 different servers in different countries, you can just kind of pretend like you're logging in from the US or from anywhere in Asia. And the best part about PIA is just how easy it is to use it. You open it up, you choose the location, one click, and you're connected. It's very easy. Using PIA can also help you to save money. If you change your geolocation, all of a sudden you might see that the flights have a different price. Also, when booking hotels, if you change your location, you often can find a better deal. With my link, you can get 83% off and another 4 extra months on top. So I think that brings down the subscription to something like $2.03 a month. An absolute essential tool when traveling, especially to some of the more restricted parts of this world. First link in the description.
Today is the day. We're leaving China. To be fair, tomorrow morning. But in today's video, I want to share with you my thoughts after spending a little bit over a week in Shanghai, also going a little bit outside to some of the neighboring cities. And I have to tell you one thing, I definitely thought I would be impressed. And I was. Just the architecture, like right now we are on the Pudong side, basically where the business district is, where the third tallest tower in the world is. And if you have watched the previous videos, I did a little series basically covering Shanghai, different districts. And what I have to say is that I was not just surprised by perhaps how modern the city is, but actually by how in many ways I also felt really comfortable. In some ways, maybe it's even livable. They have so many different districts, from the super new, the super modern, to old districts. Shanghai has a pretty long history. Sometimes part of the city were kind of like, perhaps you could say, I think they called it concessions back in the day. And really, especially the other side of the water, some of the buildings have a history of over 100 years. And I want to share with you a little bit my impressions, my thoughts before coming here, because many times when you would think, hey, it's probably going to be a little bit hard to get around. It's probably going to be perhaps even hard to get into the country. Like some people on a transit visa, they require you to have a little bit more documentation, like where you're going to be staying, what you're going to be doing. And generally, if you're just following Western news, you might think that the city is going to be a little bit, you're going to be watched. Perhaps you might have the expectation that everything is going to be extremely controlled. And there's many cities I've been to, and all of them have a bit of a different vibe. Like Singapore has some crazy laws which are usually not really enforced. You're not even allowed to have gum, things like that. But when you think of China, you think like, oh, there's cameras everywhere, oh, the immigration. And I have to tell you that, first of all, first video I've covered it, immigration was one of the smoothest process. And I don't want to say like, hey, I don't want this to be one of those videos where it's like, oh, everybody was so kind, everybody was so nice, I love the people, love the culture. Like the typical travel video where no matter where you go, there's always the kindest and the nicest people. I want to share with you more of a feeling. in China. Officially the second time. I've been a couple of days in Shenzhen a long time ago. And it's pretty much the last night right now, flying out tomorrow morning. And I thought to film a little bit of a video, take you throughout the next couple of hours, probably tomorrow morning as well, the airport, and just share my honest thoughts. How is it gonna be on the streets? How is it gonna be with shooting? Is there gonna be police everywhere? Is it like a very monitored city? Or is it perhaps, for me personally, in terms of traveling, in terms of visiting, in some ways I probably prefer it over New York or London. I mean, I don't like the two cities too much, so it's not that hard, but wow, look at that. Crazy. Crazy, crazy. Lotus Tower just lit up. We are right now in the Pudong district, and I am heading out to the place that I'm staying right now. I'm just wondering, where is my taxi gonna stop? Interesting. How can I get to it? Shanghai Airport. Back at it again. All right. So having to leave China quickly. I think this might be right now the latest hotel airport departure. You see, it's early. It's like 6 a.m. Latest airport departure in a long time. I left like 2 hours maybe before the flight, 15-minute drive. I checked, you can check in for international flights here until like 60 minutes before departure, which is good. So let's pass all the immigration, everything, make sure we don't get stuck anywhere, and then talk about the time here. So made it through immigration. Everything was super smooth, super quick, pretty much like on the way of getting here. So I wanted to take the time a little bit to wrap up this trip, talk a little bit about it, what were the expectations for it. It was in some ways somewhat spontaneous. I was in Asia, I was planning to go to Europe for summer, and I thought, hey, what are some places I wanted to go to that I haven't been to, that I'm just kind of curious to see how they are, how they feel. Much more, not in terms of like, maybe some of you know, I know a good bit about China. I've been in Hong Kong many times, been to China, know a lot about the country, the history, but you can only know so much without ever really being there for a while. That gives you another first layer. The next layer would be like really staying longer, coming back a lot, perhaps living there for a while. And I have to tell you, just to kind of like review a little bit. So we arrived here in the same airport. I'm just trying not to miss my gate. Flying to Seoul, Korea right now actually. Also excited about the contrast, the differences. So I arrived here, and honestly, just from the general perception in most of the world, China seems fairly restrictive, be it in terms of what you see communicated about, like generally the environment, but even more so like just traveling there. Like visas back in the day you had to get, maybe you can get a transit visa for 3 days, 6 days, but then they want to see like every day of your hotel booking, things like that. And I have to tell you that just arriving here was pretty easy, pretty smooth, quickly through immigration. Young people working at immigration, no questions asked, depending on your passport. So if you come like without the visa, either a transit visa or for like a good bunch, I think over 10 different nations, you can get a 15-day visa. So coming in, all of that, good impressions. And what I'm realizing right away is that Chinese people are pretty chill in many ways, in the sense that people smoke everywhere, people cross the street when there's not a green light shining. Most people you talk to, they were pretty chill. Like you see drones flying in a lot of places, and the situation on the ground very often is quite different from what you think how it might be. Just also walking on the street, everything is very organized, everything is working, and I'm sure people are very hesitant to go kind of like against let's say, you know where the line is, so to say. But in terms of traveling it was a pretty easy and chill experience. I like to call that kind of like a certain soft freedom. Like, yes, there is police in many places, less than in many other big cities, much less honestly, like on the main squares perhaps, but most of that, it almost like there's certain self-regulation going on. So most of the other neighborhoods I visited in Shanghai are just working. And so it was kind of like a nice mix of a certain safety, whereas at the same time, it's not an actively enforced one. Like, I never felt like I'm being watched. Like in many different countries, like I'm just coming from Philippines. If you're in a big city, like you're gonna be watched non-stop by security guards on every corner. Let's see, is that my flight? Yep, I'm gonna be boarding soon. And so that for me was very positive because I didn't know. I was never to Shanghai. It's a big city. It's a big money place in China. And you might think that everything is gonna be kind of like, you know, there's gonna be security everywhere. They're gonna tell you, hey, you can do this, you can do that, not do that. And like, it's not like I wanna do something. I don't wanna do anything. I just wanna have like a certain chill environment. It's like in many places like Singapore, perhaps, Dubai, you hear they have strict laws and you would think like, oh no, if they're gonna see me like in Dubai holding hands with somebody, oh no, if they're gonna catch me with some gum in Singapore, I'm done. But the reality looks actually quite different. And then there is other places where, like even in Europe, some countries, people kind of like monitor each other. They watch what you're doing. Like even, and Shanghai very much had like a certain big city anonymity going on to it. So as you see, if you're new here on the channel by any chance, I talk a lot about building a life of freedom around the world. And while China perhaps in terms of like living, if there would be some opportunity, I definitely wouldn't be opposed to spending more time here. But at the same time, in terms of traveling, I have to say it was very, very chill. And just to review a little bit, I arrived in Shanghai and went first to the Bond area. Skyline is crazy, it's beautiful. You have the old Shanghai, you have the new Shanghai. And then I dived into the city and I went to so many different neighborhoods where I was like, wow, first of all, many neighborhoods are kind of like European influence from back in the 20th century, like French, English, lots of old buildings, lots of people used to live in Shanghai. It's one of the, let's say, cities that has been more influenced by that. And that was really interesting because it's not just like a new city, just concrete buildings, just like pulled up in the last couple of years, but actually has a lot of history and you feel it. And I think depending on your personal taste, I don't have like a big preference. I like the big city. I like cute little streets with old houses, with nice cafes. What I had mixed feelings about is that many of the famous streets, they're like a super like photo hotspot, especially for local tourism. So like the energy there is a little bit like not like day to day. People are just sitting there enjoying their coffee, but everybody's crazy about kind of like, well, it's probably like a hype status place to go there. Certain streets, the Wukong Street. Some locals recommended it to me. They were like, oh wow, it's so nice. There's like, it looks like Europe, and I'm like, yeah, kind of, it does a little bit, but at the same time, for me, some nice cafes. If you're into that, I would recommend it. For me, it was actually much more interesting to see kind of like the busy business districts, the old streets, some of the Chinese markets, and that as well in the middle of the city. It is just regular, real China life, markets, food, and nowhere where I went, and I went from north to south. I haven't filmed all. Sometimes I just walked around, explored a bit. I have to tell, there was not a single area where I was like, oh, here it's not so nice, which actually surprised me. I'm sure probably there is if you like drive out, just like more regular, perhaps not like extremely well maintained like everything I have seen. And yeah, generally I would say China for me is very interesting in the sense that there is this perception that it's very restrictive on the outside, and whereas me personally, I would not mess around with like doing anything wrong here. At the same time, a certain soft freedom is there, especially for like a trip, a visit. Let's sit down here. I was trying to walk away from the noise, and I'm definitely will be back. I mean, like, There's many other big cities that I think would be also very interesting, because Shanghai is fairly international, which is great if it's like a first-time visit. But at the same time, perhaps I was missing a little bit that certain edge. And I've actually went to the neighboring city of Suzhou. And one thing, it's one of the loudest projecting vocal like environments. Like people speak really loud, but like casually. It's not like people are not trying to yell. That's just how it is, which is quite interesting. And generally, to me, it feels a little bit closer to home in a weird way. Like many Asian nations, the vibe is very different. Like let's say my roots are Eastern European. I lived in Europe, lived in the US. And with that many countries I go to, I just don't feel it's different. It's interesting. But in China, there is an Eastern European flavor in the way of communication and the way of certain social nuances. I'm sure there's big differences as well, but you feel a certain, like I talked to a couple of locals about the world, and there is a funny thing going on. They're like, yeah, in public you better don't say that, which reminds me of being in countries like Belarus, for example, where in public you better don't say that. And I don't know, I'm probably not getting myself into any trouble with it. I don't want to make it like a political discussion in any way, because I'm not far away from being educated enough on doing that. But for me, it was very interesting how it's going to be feeling to just walk through the city, to stay in a couple of different neighborhoods. And in terms of everything, this is probably one of my favorite big cities in the world. Shanghai, definitely top 3, 5. Like let's say places like Bangkok perhaps probably offer a bit more value, a lot more. Like Shanghai is not a cheap city, but it's definitely not like an extremely expensive one. Like where I'm going to Seoul right now, you can get like a hostel for $50, I think. So it's not cheap. Seoul. Shanghai, especially when I went to Suzhou, like one night I got a quick hotel, and generally food on the streets, everything else. Taxis are cheaper than Thailand or where was I? Philippines or something. I drove to the airport now for $15 throughout the city. I was driving around for like $3-4 for like not short trips necessarily. Usually I like to be the last one to board, so let's just hang out a bit more. The only downside that there is perhaps is that most people don't speak English, which is a downside in the sense of like ease of travel. I don't think it's a problem. Most people are used to using Google Translate. It's just sometimes it's quite funny actually. Like you speak English. Like English is not my native tongue. I don't really have a native tongue so much because like I grew up speaking Russian, but it's far from being my best language like English hopefully is for a long time already. But what I mean is like they speak Chinese to you, a lot of people, because that's the only thing they can do. And it's the same way like people who can only speak English anywhere in the world or at the end of the world, and that's just the only language they can say something. So many situations where people just speak to you Chinese, they expect you to understand it. You speak to them English, you expect them to understand it. But with Google Translate, and generally also to speak about the sentiment, like with so many travel videos you're watching, there's always like, oh my God, the people were so kind, so loving, so warm. And I think people are people everywhere, and there is certain nuances. There is certain countries due to certain history or certain environment they're in now or have been in recent times where there might be perhaps more warmth or more attention, less attention, care more about you as a visitor, care less about you. Of course, there's also often a lot of pride. Like let's say when somebody comes to visit a country, many people feel like the desire to present the country from the best side, and I think that's a beautiful thing in many ways. But at the same time, it's like I don't want to do those videos where it's like, oh my God, the people were so kind. But what I can say is everybody I talked to, like at the hotel I stayed, a couple people that I met, local, they all were pretty chill, like Eastern European vibe chill. Like you talk to some Europeans, some Central Europeans, and there's often like a very much like, oh, this, what if everybody would do that? But that's against the rules. That is not good. It's like, well, is it harming anybody? Is it like I don't want to give you very specific instances. I'm talking very small things like in New York, everybody walks on red, and like this was one of the examples I can give you. For example, like if there's no cars, are you like harming the world by like crossing the street every once in a while on red? And you might think like in China, it's like, oh no, there's cameras everywhere, and probably there is. That also can do like you can get fined, I'm sure. And I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying that the general population is like, well, come on, like sometimes if I need to cross, I cross, and it is what it is. Like try and stop me. Oh, what if everybody is gonna do that? Well, not everybody is gonna do that. And it's like for me, that is really a big cultural question of how is soft freedom? How are people? And I have to say that I knew a couple of Chinese people throughout my life, and now I have spent a little bit more time, a little first taste. And I have to say, China, you have been good. You've been pretty good, for real. Easy, professional. Where's my passport? Oppa. And so we are riding out. I almost could have done a couple more days. It's funny, back in the day they only offered 6 days transit visa. And I was like, nah, that's way too short. Now I ended up staying 8 days. I feel like a strategist, planning genius. But yeah, a couple days in Seoul. It's gonna be 3 nights, pretty much 3 full days. Quite excited about another country I wanted to visit for quite a while. Another little map to unlock for now, just get a little flavor. Probably not as much as in Shanghai, but yeah, definitely will be back, probably even this year, next year. So check out the other couple full videos to see everything I've been talking about today while we're boarding. Korean Air. At first. I mean, Korean Air is not Wizz Air. Maybe, who knows, maybe Korean Air is the Wizz Air of Asia. But no, never seen them before. So China Eastern actually is flying a lot of routes straight to Europe. Rome, Frankfurt, London, for under like 300 bucks. It's quite crazy. So in case you're planning to come out, check them out. And that's why I'm also saying, like, if I'm planning to head back to Asia, why not for China? 15 days, go to a couple more cities. Guangdong, Chengdu, Beijing. Actually wanted to go to Nanjing on this visit as well, didn't have quite the time. Seriously, I love the colors though. Nice little baby blue. Hello.
Hello.
So, I'm going to be quickly passing through. Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ooh. Early touchdown in Seoul. First impression, the airport looking pretty good, pretty shiny. First time in Korea. And yeah, just flew in from Shanghai. Early wake-up call today. And I'm quite excited. Like, I don't know anything about Seoul. Very spontaneous trip.
So overall, even though the video was a bit of a clickbait, I have to tell you, I had an absolute smooth and relaxed experience coming to China, traveling through 2 of the major cities. You can check out all the videos below. Will put together a full guide, a full experience video, which is coming next. It's a huge country, there's much more to see, so I definitely see myself coming back in the near future. If you want to see where I am right now, join me on Instagram, and with that, you too got a world to see.